My grandmother used to tell me stories about skinwalkers, shapeshifters, who could take the form of animals. She said they were real, not just legends, not just tales to frighten children. She said they walked among us, disguised, hidden in plain sight, their true nature concealed behind a veil of deception. I never believed her, not really. Not until I heard about what happened to the walkers in '86, and not until I found the journal. I guess the truth always has a way of revealing itself, whether we're ready for it or not. I'm Aiden, by the way, Aiden Blackwood. I grew up on the outskirts of the Navajo Nation, surrounded by the whispers of the old ways, by the echoes of a past that seemed both distant and incredibly close. The land here is ancient, scarred by time and marked by secrets, and the stories they tell are not for the faint of heart. Most people dismiss them as folklore, as harmless tales to entertain around the fire, but I've learned that some stories are more than just stories, that some legends have teeth. The walkers, they were not locals. They came from out of state, a group of college students, I believe. They were known for being disrespectful, loud, and disruptive. They came to our land with an air of arrogance, as if they were superior, as if they owned the place. They mocked our customs, laughed at our stories, they treated the sacred places as mere playgrounds, and they ignored all the warnings. They were warned to stay away from certain areas, places where the veil between worlds is thin, where the line between the living and the dead becomes blurred. They were told that those places were sacred, that they were not to be disturbed, that the spirits that resided there were not to be trifled with. They were told that these were not just stories, that these were not just legends, but, of course, they didn't listen. They scoffed at the warnings. They dismissed them as nothing but superstitious ramblings, and they went where they were told not to go. They always do. They went into the canyons at night, during the dark moon, a time when the skinwalkers are strongest, a time when the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. It was a foolish, reckless act, a blatant disregard for the ancient laws of this land, and they did not heed the warnings of the elders, of the stories of those who came before, and perhaps that was their biggest error. They thought they knew better, but they were wrong. They were never seen again. The official report said they got lost, fell into a ravine, or perhaps were attacked by wild animals. The Park Service and the authorities dismissed it as a tragic accident, a sad event. But the elders knew better. They said a skinwalker, angered by their disrespect, had cursed them, that the shapeshifter had taken the form of a coyote, lured them to the edge of a precipice, and then, with a terrifying shift, had pushed them over the edge. The story was told in hushed tones in the darkness of the night, and I could see the fear in the elders' eyes. I could feel the chill in the air, the heavy weight of the unspoken truth. It was not just a story, it was a warning, a reminder of the power that still lived in this land, a reminder of the consequences of disrespect and the ever-present dangers that lurked in the shadows. It was a chilling account of the dark forces that existed and the true nature of their power. I heard the stories, saw the fear in the elders' eyes, but even then, a part of me remained skeptical. I wanted to believe, but a modern upbringing had taught me to be cautious, to be wary of such tales, to be rational. I was caught between two worlds, between the ancient wisdom of my heritage and the cold logic of the modern world. I wanted to understand, I wanted to believe, but the fear was stronger, and it kept me at an arm's length from the legends. Years later, after my grandmother passed, I was helping my mother clean out her old house when I found it. An old, leather-bound journal tucked away in a dusty corner of her attic. The journal was filled with her writings, her thoughts, her observations, her detailed accounts of the strange and terrifying encounters she had had with skinwalkers over the years. She had kept it hidden, a secret that she had shared with no one, a silent testament to her belief in the old ways and the undeniable truth of the power of the supernatural. She wrote about the signs, the subtle shifts in the wind, the strange animal tracks, the eerie silence that often descended upon the land before an encounter. She wrote about the terrifying transformations, the way the skinwalkers could morph from human to animal, the way their eyes would glow with an unnatural light, the way their voices would become distorted, filled with a chilling emptiness. She wrote about the fear she felt, but she also wrote about the responsibility she carried, the responsibility to protect her people from these dark forces. In the back of the journal, tucked between the pages, was a small silver arrowhead, etched with strange symbols. It was more than just a piece of metal. It was a tool, an artifact of ancient power, a key to understanding the true nature of the skinwalkers and the secrets that had been passed down through the generations. I touched it, and a jolt of energy coursed through me, a feeling that was both chilling and exhilarating, a feeling that confirmed the truth of my grandmother's stories, and a warning that I was now part of something greater than myself. I had always dismissed the skinwalkers as legends, as harmless tales to scare children, but now I knew the truth. They were real, they were powerful, and they were dangerous. And I had inherited not only their stories, but a way to somehow perhaps try to protect myself from them, a tool that was finally mine. The line had become blurred, the rational had faded, and my life, my understanding of the world, had been changed forever. The world had now become darker, and I could feel the presence of the skinwalkers surrounding me, and the old legends had become my harsh and terrifying reality. My grandmother, Sarah Blackwood, was a woman of contradictions. She was kind and gentle, always ready with a warm smile and a comforting word. But there was also a fierceness within her, a strength that seemed to emanate from the very depths of her soul. She was a devout follower of the old ways, a keeper of the ancient traditions, but she also lived in the modern world. She was a businesswoman, a pillar of the community, someone who straddled the two worlds with an almost effortless grace. It was that duality that I both admired and feared, the way she could move so seamlessly between the mundane and the supernatural. She never pushed her beliefs on me. She never forced me to accept the old ways. She simply shared her stories, her legends, her experiences, and she let me come to my own conclusions. She knew that the path I chose had to be my own, that I could not be forced to believe, that I had to find the truth within my own heart. She was patient, wise, and I miss her terribly now that I have truly started to understand her world. She told me that the skinwalkers were not just monsters, that they were not just shapeshifters. They were something more complex, something more ancient, something that represented the darkest aspects of the human spirit, the twisted reflection of our own fears and desires. She said that they were a warning, a reminder of the dangers of greed, of arrogance, of disrespect, and that the worst monsters were not those that lived in the shadows, but those that lived within our own hearts. She was a complex woman, a woman of contradictions, and I loved her for it. The stories she told, they were not just about skinwalkers, they were about our connection to the land, our responsibility to the environment, our relationship with the spiritual world. She said that the land was a living being, that it had a soul, and that we as humans were a part of its interconnected web, and that our actions had consequences, not just for ourselves, but for the entire world. She was a fierce protector of this land, someone who had dedicated her life to the preservation of its natural beauty and its cultural heritage. The walkers, the college students who disappeared in '86, they were not just victims of a skinwalker's curse, they were a symbol of the arrogance of the modern world, the way people have become disconnected from nature, from their heritage, from their own humanity. They were a cautionary tale, a reminder of the importance of respect, of the dangers of ignoring the warnings of the past, and of the arrogance that comes with ignorance. The land where the walkers disappeared, it was not just a canyon, it was a place of power, a place where the veil between worlds is thin, a place where the spirits walk freely. It was a place that had been scarred by time, marked by countless battles and permeated with ancient power, and yet it is still considered a beautiful place by all who witness it. It was a reminder of the delicate balance between the natural world and the supernatural, a place that had to be both respected and revered. It was the heart of our world, a sacred place that had to be honored. The silver arrowhead, the one I found in my grandmother's journal, it was not just an artifact. It was a symbol of protection, a tool for connecting with the spiritual world, a reminder of the power that lived within me and the responsibilities I now carried. It was a connection to the past, but it was also a guide to the future, and it was a warning to be careful, to be vigilant, to be prepared for the dangers that now lay ahead. I had never felt such a profound connection to my heritage before. Before finding the journal, the old stories had been just that, stories, something that I had heard, but had never truly understood. But now, those stories felt real, they felt alive, and I could feel the weight of the ancestors resting upon my shoulders, a burden I was now forced to carry and fully embrace, even if I was not completely sure about what the future had in store for me. I started to see the world differently. The shadows seemed to move, the wind seemed to whisper secrets, and the animals seemed to watch me with knowing eyes. It was as if the veil between worlds had become thinner, and that the supernatural was now a part of my reality, a place where legends had become truth, and where my path was being made clearer each and every day, even if my destination was still hidden behind a veil of mystery. The more I delved into my grandmother's journal, the more I realized how little I knew about the world, about myself, about the true nature of the forces that lived both around and within us. The skinwalkers were no longer just monsters. They were a reflection of the darkness that lived in our souls, a reminder of the consequences of our actions, and a constant threat that I was now going to face with nothing but a small silver arrowhead and a bunch of old tales to guide my way. I was going to have to decide where my path was taking me and what was going to be my part in all of this, whether I liked it or not. The encounter with the skinwalker in the woods was a turning point, a moment that shifted the trajectory of my life, forcing me to confront the reality of the world I had always tried to avoid. It wasn't just a fight against a shape-shifting creature. It was a battle against my own fears, my own doubts, and my own internal demons. It was a realization that the old stories were not just legends, but a reflection of the dark forces that lurked within us all, a chilling truth that I was now forced to embrace. I remembered a conversation I had with my mother after my grandmother's passing. She was a woman of practicality, someone who had always been skeptical of the old ways. But that night, she revealed a part of herself that I had never seen before. She confessed that she had seen things, strange and unexplainable things during her childhood, that she had felt the presence of the skinwalkers, that she had always carried a subtle fear of the dark, and that perhaps my grandmother had been right all along. It was a confession that changed my perception of her, that revealed the hidden depths of her soul, and that further solidified the reality of the supernatural world that was now a part of my life. She had never wanted me to follow in my grandmother's footsteps. She had wanted me to have a normal life, to live in the modern world, and she had feared the burden that my heritage carried, the responsibilities that had been passed down through the generations. She had been trying to protect me, but in doing so, she had also kept me in the dark. And now, the truth was out, the secrets had been revealed, and it was up to me to decide what path I would now take. I also remembered a story my grandmother used to tell me about a young man who had tried to hunt the skinwalkers. He had sought to destroy them. He had been blinded by hatred, by arrogance, by a thirst for revenge, and he had ended up becoming one of them, a twisted reflection of the very monsters he had tried to destroy. She said that the darkness could corrupt even the purest of hearts, that the desire for vengeance could consume even the strongest of wills, and that the only way to fight back was to embrace the light, to choose compassion over hatred. to understand rather than fear. That story, it had always seemed like a cautionary tale, but now it felt like a warning, a glimpse into a possible future that I had to avoid at all costs. I knew that I had to be careful, that I had to stay true to my own path, that I could not allow myself to be consumed by the darkness, that I had to keep in check the anger that was bubbling within me and focus on the task that had been placed before me. I started to notice that the silver arrowhead was not just a tool for fighting the skinwalkers, it was also a connection to my past, a way to tap into the wisdom of my ancestors and to understand the true nature of the forces that I was now confronting. The symbols etched onto it would shift and change, revealing new clues, new warnings, new possibilities, and I spent countless hours studying them, meditating on them, trying to decipher the secrets that they held. I also realized that the skinwalkers were not just mindless monsters. They were beings with their own motives, their own desires, their own reasons for existing. They were twisted by the darkness, corrupted by the hunger for power, and consumed by an ancient thirst, a hunger for the very essence of life. But they were also victims, trapped in a cycle of violence and, perhaps, even despair. I began to consider the possibility that maybe they were not simply to be destroyed, that perhaps there was another way, a way to break the cycle, a way to free them from the darkness that had consumed them. I started to see that my journey was not just about fighting the skinwalkers, it was about understanding them. It was about understanding the darkness that resided within me, and it was about finding a way to bridge the gap between the ancient world and the modern world. I realized that my path was not going to be easy, that I was going to face challenges, that I was going to make difficult choices, but I also knew that I was not alone, that the spirits of my ancestors were with me, and that the hope for a better future would guide me to the end. It was time to finally embrace the journey, to understand all the subtle pieces of the puzzle, to put the ancient stories into the test, and finally face my destiny head on. The land itself seemed to be reacting to the growing tension, the canyons deepening, the shadows lengthening, and the wind whispering strange secrets that seemed to echo the turmoil within my own soul. The once familiar woods had transformed into a labyrinth of distorted shapes and ominous sounds, each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig sending a jolt of fear through my body. The air hung heavy with a palpable sense of dread, a feeling that I was being watched, that I was being drawn into a trap, and that the skinwalkers were closing in, their presence becoming more and more tangible with each passing day. The familiar had become alien, and the comforting was now a thing of fear. I had been spending my days poring over my grandmother's journal, trying to decipher the secrets of the silver arrowhead, and searching for a way to break the cycle of violence that had plagued this land for so long. I had been trying to understand the skinwalkers, to understand the darkness that fueled them, and the ancient legends that defined their existence, but the answers seemed to be always just out of reach, like whispers on the wind that faded just as they were about to become clear. I was getting closer, but the journey was taking its toll on my resolve, and the weight of my responsibility was pressing down on me, a burden that seemed too heavy to bear. One night I decided to return to the canyon where the walkers had disappeared, the place where the veil between worlds was said to be thin, the place where the skinwalkers were strongest. I felt a strange pull, an irresistible urge to confront the darkness, to face my fears, and to discover the truth that had been hidden for so long. The moon was a sliver of silver in the inky sky, casting long, eerie shadows across the landscape, and the air was thick with an unnatural stillness that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The whole place seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As I entered the canyon, the temperature dropped sharply, and the wind picked up, swirling around me like a living thing, and the shadows began to move, twisting, and contorting into grotesque shapes that seemed to be watching me, their eyes burning with an unnatural light. I felt an overwhelming sense of unease, a feeling that I was no longer alone, that I had entered a place where the rules of reality no longer applied, a place where the darkness held dominion and where the creatures of nightmares roamed free. I reached for the silver arrowhead, my fingers trembling, and I focused my mind on the ancient symbols, trying to invoke the power that lay dormant within them. And the arrowhead seemed to glow with an inner light, its energy surging through me as the shadows began to coalesce, the twisted forms shifting and solidifying, and it was then that I saw them. The skinwalkers were there, not just one, but many, their shapes shifting between human and animal, their eyes burning with a cold, malevolent intent. And I knew that I had finally reached the end of my journey, and that my life was about to take a turn I had never imagined. But as I prepared to face them, something unexpected happened. One of the skinwalkers, the one that seemed to be leading the others, stepped forward, and as it did, its form began to shift, not into an animal, but into a human, an old woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. It was my grandmother. The shock was so overwhelming that I almost dropped the arrowhead. I had been so focused on the stories, on the legends, on the supernatural, that I had failed to see the most obvious truth, the one that had been hidden in plain sight from the very beginning. I looked at her, my mind reeling with disbelief, my heart pounding in my chest, and I realized that she had been a skinwalker all along, that she had been manipulating me, guiding me, testing me, and leading me to this moment. The stories she told, the warnings she shared, the journal she had left behind. It had all been a carefully constructed trap, designed to test my strength, to assess my worthiness, and to determine if I was strong enough to join her or to become another victim of her ancient pact. The revelation was a crushing blow, a betrayal that cut me to the very core. Everything I had believed, everything I had held sacred, had been twisted, warped, and manipulated by the very woman I had loved and trusted the most. The world seemed to fall away. The ground beneath my feet became unstable, and I was left alone, in the darkness, facing a truth that I had never seen coming. And in that moment I finally realized the true enemy was not the skinwalkers, it was always her, and I had been a pawn in her game from the very beginning. The old stories were not enough. The legends were distorted, and the true power, the real enemy, had been by my side all along. My breath hitched in my throat, each inhale a ragged, desperate gasp, as the image of my grandmother, a woman I had loved and revered, shifted and contorted before my very eyes. Her kind smile twisted into a cruel sneer. Her gentle eyes burned with an icy, malevolent light, and the very air around her seemed to crackle with an unnatural energy. My fingers trembled so violently that I could barely hold the silver arrowhead, and a cold wave of nausea washed over me, threatening to overwhelm my senses. The betrayal was a physical blow, a crushing weight that seemed to shatter everything I had believed, everything I had held sacred, and the world around me seemed to spin, the landscape distorting into a nightmarish canvas of shadows and deceit. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to deny the reality of what I was seeing, but the words were stuck in my throat, choked by a mixture of fear, anger, and a profound sense of loss. The woman who had taught me to love the land, the woman who had shared the ancient stories, the woman who had always seemed so wise and so kind, was now revealed to be a monster, a shapeshifter, a skinwalker, and the weight of that revelation was almost too much to bear. The truth had finally been revealed, but it was a truth that I did not want to face, and now I was forced to confront her and also myself. The other skinwalkers, they stood motionless, their forms shifting and contorting, their eyes fixed on me with a predatory intensity, as if they were waiting for my reaction, as if they were expecting me to break, to crumble under the weight of the betrayal. They seemed to be enjoying my suffering, feeding on my despair, and their silence was almost more terrifying than any scream could ever have been. They had been watching me, they had been studying me, they had been waiting for me to finally arrive. To this moment, And now, they were ready to seal my fate and claim me for their own. My grandmother, the skinwalker, her voice changed, the gentle tone replaced by a cold, distorted rasp that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth. And she spoke to me, her words like daggers piercing my heart, each one a reminder of her deception, each one a challenge to my will. She told me that she had chosen me, that she had been waiting for me, that I was destined to become like her, to embrace the power of the darkness, and to join the ranks of the skinwalkers. She had been planning this for so long, manipulating the events in my life and carefully guiding me to this final moment. She said that I had the blood of the skinwalkers in my veins, that I had inherited their power, that I had been a part of them all along, and that the path I had chosen, the path of a protector, of a guardian, had always been a charade, a distraction from my true destiny. I wanted to deny her words, I wanted to reject her claim, but a part of me knew that she was telling the truth, that there was a darkness within me, a hunger for power, a thirst for vengeance, a shadow that I had always tried to suppress, but which now seemed to be rising to the surface. I looked at the silver arrowhead, the symbol of my heritage, the tool that I had always believed would protect me from the darkness, and it seemed to waver, its light dimming, its power waning, as if it too was acknowledging the truth of my grandmother's words. The symbols etched onto it now seemed like a mockery, a cruel joke, a reminder of the manipulation and the betrayal that I had been subjected to. I had been so focused on the ancient legends, on the old stories, that I had failed to see the darkness that was right in front of me, and the horror of that reality was slowly starting to overwhelm me. My mind was racing, my emotions were a chaotic storm, and I felt the world closing in around me, as if the very fabric of reality was collapsing, and I was struggling to hold on to the last vestiges of my humanity. I had been so ready to fight, to stand against the darkness, to embrace the role of a protector, but now, faced with the truth of my own heritage, I began to question everything. I was starting to realize the true power of the skinwalkers and also the true meaning of my battle. And I was terrified of what the future would bring. It was a moment of pure horror, of betrayal that cut to the core, and I did not know if I would survive the truth, much less the battle to come. The shock of my grandmother's revelation, the crushing weight of her betrayal, threatened to consume me, to shatter my spirit, and to plunge me into the abyss of despair. But as I stood there facing her and the other skinwalkers, a flicker of defiance ignited within me, a stubborn refusal to surrender, a spark of the ancient fire that had always burned within my soul. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of moments, there was always a choice, always a possibility to resist, to fight back, and to reclaim my own destiny. The truth was out. I had been betrayed by the very person that I had loved the most. And now, it was time for me to make the most important decision of my life. I realized that true strength was not about suppressing the darkness within, but about understanding it, about embracing it, about choosing to use its power for good rather than for evil. I had been trying to fight the skinwalkers with fear, with anger, with hatred, but now I understood that those were the very emotions that fueled their existence, that strengthened their power, and that made them capable of manipulating their victims. It was a battle that could not be won with violence, with brute force, with a desire for revenge, but with something that was entirely different. I remembered my grandmother's words, her warnings about the dangers of hubris, about the consequences of arrogance, about the importance of compassion, empathy, and understanding. I had always seen them as cautionary tales, as guidelines for living, but now I understood that they were also a way forward, a path to salvation, a key to unlocking the true power that was hidden within me. It was a paradox, but it was finally clear that the way to defeat the skinwalkers was not to become like them, but to become something more, something that was far beyond their grasp. I took a deep breath, and I let go of the fear, the anger, the hatred, and I embraced the truth of my heritage, the darkness that lived within me, but I also embraced the light, the compassion, the love that my grandmother had shared even in her most cruel deception. It was a complex and painful choice, but it was the only one I could now take, and I knew that the fate of the Badlands, and perhaps the world, depended on what I did in the next few moments. I looked at my grandmother, her face a twisted reflection of my own pain, and I saw not a monster, but a victim, a soul that had been consumed by the darkness, a being that had been trapped in a cycle of violence, and a creature who deserved compassion, even if I had been the target of her manipulations. It was a difficult thing to do, but I felt a surge of pity, a genuine understanding of her plight, and I knew that my true strength was not in the power to destroy, but in the ability to forgive, even if it meant forgiving my own grandmother. I lowered the silver arrowhead, its light no longer a weapon, but a beacon of hope. And I began to speak, not in the language of defiance, not in the language of hatred, but in the language of understanding, in the language of compassion, in the language of my own heart. The words were not planned, they were not rehearsed. They were simply an outpouring of my emotions, a desperate plea for peace, for understanding, for a chance to break the cycle of violence. I spoke of the pain, the suffering, the betrayal, but also of the hope, the love, the compassion that I still carried within me. I spoke of the beauty of the land, of the wisdom of our ancestors, of the power of the human spirit, and I spoke of my belief that even the most corrupted souls could be redeemed, that even the most twisted hearts could be healed. It was not an act of submission, but an act of resistance, a challenge to the darkness, a testament to the power of the light. The other skinwalkers, they shifted and writhed, their forms contorting, their eyes dimming as they listened to my words. They were being forced to confront their own darkness, to acknowledge the power of the light, and to consider the possibility that perhaps their destiny was not to consume, but to be free. My grandmother, the skinwalker, her face softened, the cruel sneer fading, replaced by a mixture of sadness and a strange sense of hope. And I saw a flicker of humanity, a spark of the soul that she had tried so hard to suppress, and I knew that my words were having an impact. The tide was starting to turn, and now it was just a matter of time. It was a moment of truth, a pivotal turning point, and I was ready to embrace my fate, whatever it may be. My words seemed to hang in the air. The silence that followed was thick with anticipation, pregnant with the possibility of either redemption or destruction. The skinwalkers, their forms still shifting, their eyes now filled with a mixture of confusion and curiosity, seemed to be waiting, as if they were unsure of what was going to happen next, as if they were contemplating the truth of my words and the ancient power they were now being forced to face. The tension in the canyon was palpable. The very air seemed to vibrate with an energy that could either heal or destroy, and everything now depended on the next steps that I was going to take. My grandmother, the skinwalker, she stepped forward, her form wavering, her face a shifting mask of pain and hope. And it was then that I realized that she was not just a victim of the darkness, she was also its prisoner, trapped in a cycle of violence and held captive by an ancient power that she had never truly understood. Her betrayal was not a choice, it was a compulsion, and her true desire was not to corrupt me, but to be free. And it was then that the true nature of the situation became clear. She spoke, her voice still distorted, but with a new hint of vulnerability, and she revealed the truth about the skinwalkers, about their origins, about their purpose. She said that they were not born of darkness, they were not creatures of evil, but that they were the remnants of a forgotten people, beings who had been forced to make a pact with an ancient force, a being that fed on the negative emotions, and that they had been trapped by it for centuries, forced to feed its hunger with the very lives and souls of those they were meant to protect. They had become what they had feared the most, and their only hope was in finding a way to break their ancient pact. She said that the silver arrowhead was not just a tool for fighting the skinwalkers, it was also a key to freeing them from the darkness, a way to sever their connection to the ancient force and to restore their souls to their original forms. The symbols etched onto it were not just a map or a code, but a series of instructions, a guide to performing an ancient ritual, a way to release the ancient magic that was trapped within the silver and use its power to destroy the binding force. And it was then that I understood that my purpose was not to destroy, but to liberate. The other skinwalkers, they moved closer, their forms shifting, their eyes now filled with a mixture of hope and desperation, as if they were finally seeing a chance to break free from their ancient curse. And I felt a surge of empathy, a sense of responsibility to help them, to guide them, to lead them to the light. And I knew that the time for action had finally come. I raised the silver arrowhead, its light now a beacon of hope, and I began to chant, not in the language of defiance, but in the language of liberation, a melody of release, a hymn to the power of redemption. The words were ancient, they were powerful, and they seemed to resonate with the very fabric of reality as the symbols on the arrowhead started to glow even brighter, and the power of the silver began to pulse through my body, ready to be released. The landscape around us began to shift. The canyon walls seemed to shimmer, the shadows seemed to dissipate, and the air was filled with a palpable energy that felt both terrifying and liberating. The skinwalkers gathered closer, their forms shifting and transforming, and they seemed to be surrendering to the power of the light, ready to face the consequences of their ancient pact. And the final battle was now about to begin. But then, as I prepared to complete the ritual, my grandmother, the skinwalker, her face distorted by a mixture of pain and resolve, spoke to me one last time. She revealed a final truth, a secret that had been hidden from even her. And it was a shocking revelation that forced me to rethink everything I had believed about the skinwalkers, about myself, about the very nature of the darkness I had been fighting. She spoke about how the ancient force was not the original enemy, and how they were just another piece in a much larger puzzle. And then the ground beneath me started to tremble. It was a warning, a sign of what was to come, but it was also a promise that the end was finally near. The ground beneath me buckled and groaned, the canyon walls trembling as if they were about to collapse, and a deep guttural roar echoed through the air, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the earth, a sound that sent a shiver of terror down my spine. The skinwalkers recoiled, their forms shifting erratically, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and desperation, and even my grandmother, the skinwalker, seemed to tremble, her face a mask of recognition and dread, as she finally understood the true nature of the power that they had been bound to for so long. The truth was finally out, and the final act was about to unfold. From the depths of the earth, a monstrous form emerged, a being of pure darkness, a creature of nightmares, that seemed to be woven from shadows, its eyes burning with an ancient malevolent light, its very presence corrupting the air around us. It was the ancient force, the being that had enslaved the skinwalkers for centuries, the source of their power, the master of their fate. And it was clear that it was not going to let them go so easily. It was not a creature of our world, not a spirit, not even a demon, but something else entirely, something that predated creation, something that fed on the darkness that lived within us all. I realized that the skinwalkers were not the true enemy, that they were just victims, puppets manipulated by this ancient force, and that my battle was not against them, but against this primordial entity, this being that had been preying on our world for so long. And I also knew that the silver arrowhead, it was not going to be enough, that I had to find another way, that I had to tap into a power that was far greater than anything I had ever imagined, and it had to happen now, or all of us would become slaves to this entity forever. The ancient force lunged towards us, its form shifting and contorting, its darkness engulfing everything, and I felt a surge of terror, a feeling that I was going to be consumed by its power. but I refused to surrender. I held the silver arrowhead high, and I focused my mind on the ancient symbols. I channeled all of my energy, all of my will, into the silver, and I let out a shout that echoed through the canyon, a cry of defiance, a plea for hope, a call to the spirits of all those who had come before. And as I did, something extraordinary happened. The silver arrowhead began to glow with an intense, blinding light, its power surging through my body, and I felt a surge of energy, a feeling that I was connected to something ancient, something powerful, something that existed beyond the limits of time and space. It was not just the power of the silver, it was the power of all those who had chosen to fight for the light, the power of all those who had chosen to resist the darkness, and it was a collective power that was finally being unleashed. The light emanating from the arrowhead pierced through the darkness, and the ancient force recoiled, its monstrous form contorting, its eyes dimming, and the skinwalkers, they began to transform, their forms shifting back to their original human shapes, the darkness that had consumed them slowly fading away. It was a moment of liberation, of redemption, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and to the power of hope that had never been truly lost. But the ancient force, it was not defeated. Its darkness was still there, and I knew that I had to deliver the final blow, that I had to use the power of the arrowhead to destroy the source of its corruption. I focused my mind. I channeled all my remaining strength. I embraced the light. I felt the connection to my ancestors, to my heritage, and to the very fabric of life. And I released the power of the silver, sending a wave of energy that washed through the canyon, cleansing everything it touched, transforming the darkness into light and freeing all who had been touched by its malice. The ancient force screamed, a sound that was both terrifying and pitiable, its form dissolving, its darkness fading, and it was then that I understood. The true enemy was not the darkness, it was not the skinwalkers, it was not even the ancient force. It was the fear itself, the fear that allowed them to take control, the fear that had kept them all enslaved for centuries, and I had finally managed to conquer it, and also I had finally managed to set everyone else free. The battle was over, but the journey was not, and the choices that I had made will echo throughout my life, and perhaps even through the ages. The aftermath of the battle was a profound stillness, a silence that was no longer heavy with dread, but filled with a sense of peace, a feeling that the land itself was breathing a sigh of relief. The ancient force, the source of the skinwalkers' power, had been destroyed, its darkness banished, its influence gone, and the skinwalkers, they were finally free, their souls restored, their curse broken, and they returned to their true forms, no longer slaves to an ancient power, but individuals who had finally found their way back to the light. My grandmother, the skinwalker, she stepped forward, her face no longer twisted by darkness, but filled with a profound sense of gratitude, of peace. And she looked at me, her eyes filled with a love and a pride that I had never seen before. The silver arrowhead, its power depleted, its light now a gentle glow, remained in my hand, a symbol of the journey I had undertaken, a reminder of the battles I had fought and of the lessons I had learned. The land began to heal, the canyons returned to their original forms, the shadows dissipated, the air grew clear and clean, and the balance was finally restored. The weight that had been on my shoulders for so long was lifted, and I felt a sense of liberation, and also the knowledge that I had fulfilled my destiny, and perhaps that I had truly honored the past. I had not just destroyed a monster, I had also saved a people, and I had also saved myself. I had embraced the darkness within me, I had transformed it into light, and I had discovered the true power of compassion, empathy, and understanding. I had learned that the monsters we fear the most are often the ones we create, the ones that live within our own hearts, and that the true path to salvation is not through violence, but through forgiveness, through love, and through the willingness to see the humanity that exists within us all. The stories of the skinwalkers would continue to be told, But they would no longer be tales of fear and dread. They would become legends of hope and redemption, reminders of the strength of the human spirit, and a testament to the power of love. I had not become a hunter, I had not become a destroyer, I had become a guardian, a protector, a healer, and I had found my true path, finally, after so long, and I knew that I was going to be able to honor that journey. The bond I had with my grandmother, it was transformed. The deception was replaced by genuine love, and the past pain had given way to a deeper understanding of each other. The weight of the past was no longer a burden, but a source of strength, a testament to our shared journey, and also a symbol of the power of forgiveness. The world had been saved, the past had been honored, and now all that was left was the hope for the future. I returned to my life, but I was not the same person. I had embraced the ancient ways, I had connected with the spirits of my ancestors, and I had discovered the truth of my heritage. I had faced the darkness, I had conquered my fears, and I had become the protector I was always meant to be. The path ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready, and I was not alone. Years have passed since that night in the canyon, and the land has flourished, its beauty restored, its spirit renewed. The silver arrowhead, it remains with me, a reminder of the journey I had undertaken, the battles I had fought, and the transformations that I had experienced. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I can still hear the whispers of the wind, the voices of my ancestors, guiding me, protecting me, always. And I know that I finally made the right choices. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it has given you something to think about, made you question the nature of the darkness, and made you consider the light that we all have within us. Do you have a darkness that you struggle to face? Let me know in the comments. And now, if you're ready for another journey, click here to see my next story. It's one you will not forget.